This is the Corrections Forward podcast from the American Correctional Association. Here's your host, Rob Green.
I'd like to welcome you to episode 4 now of Corrections Connection podcast. I'm really pleased to be with you today and bring to you a colleague and a friend, Randy Liberty. Welcome to the program, Randy. Thank you for being here. Randy's the commissioner of the Maine Department of Corrections. Been the commissioner there since 2019. When I met Randall Liberty, I was immediately impressed with his style of leadership, his focus, and his story. What we try to do on this podcast is just really celebrate the profession of corrections. And again, I am so pleased to welcome Commissioner Liberty to the podcast. Thank you for being with us and to really talk about your story, Randy, and where you've been. I just think it's extraordinary what you're doing in Maine, and as extraordinary, your journey.
Thank you, Rob. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
So you've been around public safety for 36 years. Pretty extraordinary journey in and of itself, which led you to be the warden of the Maine prison. Would you tell us a little bit about your career history and your journey?
Sure. I, like you, have been at it for a long time. And so I began my journey in 1982, actually. I joined the United States Army. And when I joined, I asked to be a military policeman, and that's what I did. I served in Korea, jumped out of planes for a while, went to Fort Riley, Kansas, and that's really where I started my corrections experience. We had sort of the overflow from Leavenworth, and I served at a place called the United States Army Correctional Activity, where we had 600 inmates at the time, drill sergeants, and hired labor. And I came off active duty in 1985, and my military continued. I always wanted to be an infantryman, so I stayed in the National Guard. And I was part of a mountain infantry unit for 7 years. I was a drill sergeant for 7. I taught at West Point for 3, and then I had the opportunity to serve in Iraq in Fallujah in 2004. Simultaneous to that, I was a part-time police officer, and I worked in a county jail in Somerset County in central Maine. And kind of a unique piece of that was when I was interviewed by the sheriff to be, to do the corrections work. I asked him if I had one thing I had asked him, and it wasn't going to be a problem hiring me if my father was in, and he said it wasn't for him, and so I was hired. And not only was I in the same jail, but I was in the same unit. And as strange as it may sound, back in the early '80s, there was very little training for corrections, and so they threw me my keys and a misfitting jumpsuit, and upstairs I went. And the irony of it all was I didn't know what I was doing, and so I asked my inmate father, "What do I do next?" And he would say, "Time for count." And I'd say, "Line up for count," and he would say, "Good job. Now you need to do this next." And so he's kind of my FTO, as strange as that is. And but after I finished college and wrapped up that part-time gig, I went to work at the Kennebec County Sheriff's Office, where I stayed for 26 years. And I was a patrolman, a canine handler, rescue diver, drug investigator. I did all that work, and I was promoted eventually to chief for 5 years. Then I was the elected sheriff for 9, and I was president of the Maine Sheriffs, and I had the opportunity to go to the FBI National Academy and did all that. My wife and I always laugh because I'm asked frequently to speak, be a keynote speaker in places, and she'll always say, "Why would Central Maine Power ask you to speak?" Or, and I always say it hasn't been revealed to us yet. And I was asked to be the hospice speaker, a keynote speaker at a hospice conference at the Maine State Prison. And again, she said, "Why would they ask you to be and I don't know." And so I spoke anyways, and it went well. And it just so happened that the Commissioner of Corrections was in the crowd. And it was very shortly thereafter that he asked me to his office and asked if I'd have interest in being the warden at the Maine State Prison. And I did that, and it was fantastic. And the interesting piece of that is the first time I went to the Maine State Prison was in 1971 as a visitor, as a guest, to visit my father, who was an inmate there.
And I just want to interrupt right there, Randy.
Yeah.
You sprinkled in, as you came in to this conversation, about that professional journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this piece, the life piece,
Mm-hmm.
is such an extraordinary journey. Please continue. It's fascinating.
Yeah, so I was the 7-year-old son of an inmate when I went to the Maine State Prison for the first time, and my 3 brothers were with me, and we're actually at a Christmas party for the residents, and I have the picture in my office to this day of us sitting on Santa Claus's lap visiting my father. And 40 years later, I walked through the doors again as the warden, and so it was quite a journey from childhood incarceration for my father to become the warden. But it certainly has informed my work as a corrections professional, as a leader in the industry, and just trying to do the right thing and get the best outcomes that we can.
That journey, we often think about things that we see and we want to follow, or maybe we want to mentor an individual that inspired us. And in reading your book, and I do want to tell our listeners a bit about just an extraordinary book, Liberty's Prison, The Inmate's Son Who Radically Reformed an American Prison. It's an extraordinary read. Greatly enjoyed it. But there had to be some experiences there that maybe weren't as inspiring, but they were experiences that motivated you to want to have an impact on the system. Would you mind talking about that?
Yeah, sure. So, given that my father was in and out of jail and in prison, we lived a very humble life, and we lived in a mobile home all of my childhood until my sophomore year in high school. 4 of us in 1 bedroom, and when my sister was born, my parents ripped out the closet and built a 2x4 crib there. There are times we had no running water because the pipes would freeze. I mean, there's one winter we had 3 months of no running water. Food stamps, free hot lunch, surplus food, all of that stuff that the kids that are struggling have to endure. And so that gives me a perspective on the incarcerated families, or the families of the incarcerated. The first time that I smelled mace, OC actually, was my father came home one day drunk, and a domestic ensued. My mother called law enforcement, and I was in 5th grade, I think, at the time, and the local police chief and a state trooper came, and my father was a fighter, and they got in a fight, and they maced him. And little did I know that there'd be a frequent scent that I would throughout my career. But that was some impact there, and so I was fortunate that I had good role models that were teachers, good men that I could receive mentorship from, and track and football coaches that were, good mentors. Obviously, I had good supervision when I was in the Army, and that kind of taught me how to be a man, how to speak to women, how to be polite, how to be a team player. And I think that all of that, in combination with education and other life experiences, has formed my belief that the best approach in corrections is about dignity and respect, and having a non-adversarial approach to corrections. And really our job, we're mandated to do, is release people that are more well-adjusted and healthier than when they arrived.
I will tell our listeners, from day one, when I met you in 2019, that was when I was Secretary of Public Safety in the state of Maryland. When I think of dignity and respect, I think of Randy Liberty. How you engage people, how you talk to individuals, how you communicate your message. It's not just words for you. You live that every day.
Thank you.
So the moment happens that somehow you're offered this opportunity to become the warden of the Maine State Prison. Tell me about that moment. And you had that history that you had, your family history, that had to impact you and what you wanted to do.
It was profound, really. I had never, thought that was a path that I would be offered. It hadn't even crossed my mind. And so, when I called my wife and said, "You're not going to believe it," the commissioner has offered me the position to be, the warden of the prison, and she was shocked. And but I quickly realized that here's an opportunity. And I think, like many listeners will agree, when we're in the, we're entry level or mid managers or wherever we are in an organization, we think to ourselves that if I have an opportunity to be in charge, things are going to be different. And I felt that way as sheriff, and I certainly felt that way as warden. And when the commissioner gave me the biggest task was to change the culture at the prison.
Mm-hmm.
And when I walked in, First day, I walked into the lobby and there were two officers to the left, and I approached them and said, "Hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you." And one of them refused to shake my hand, and he said, "I don't know who you are." And I said, "I'm the new warden. I just want to introduce myself, and nice to meet you." He refused to shake my hand. And I went to the deputy warden and I said, "We had talked on the phone about culture, and you had said, I don't know what they're talking about." I said, "This is what we're talking about. The inability to interact, to be respectful to each other, to care for one another. It just makes no sense." And I said, if this happened at the Maine State Police, when the new commissioner approached, he'd say, "Give me your weapon, give me your badge, give me your keys, and ask your spouse for a ride." And it was then that I took 60 days or so to assess what was going on at the prison. I saw solitary confinement. I saw, people being wrecked in a dog pen. I saw a lot of, a lot of use of OC, and I think that we could do better. And I spoke with the staff and spent a lot of time with them. And the fact of the matter was they had been neglected. They hadn't received any professional development. They were sort of stuck where they were. They didn't feel appreciated or trusted. And so I began the journey to change that.
And I think that's really important there, that you really began to concentrate on the staff, on your people,
Mm-hmm.
and you are a people-centered individual. I've watched
Mm-hmm.
that at every turn, and I am a believer that sometimes, not sometimes, frequently, we become indoctrinated into the environment of what we are surrounded with. And one of the things that I've heard from some of your team and your staff is that you immediately cared about them, engaged, and really bonded with your staff in the beginnings of the Maine model and what you expected to do. You didn't point to the dark door and say, "There it is. I'll be right behind you." You led, and it seems that many, your team, your state, they followed you, and you're doing some really extraordinary work around the Maine model. Tell us about the Maine model. Tell us what you did and what you were focusing on, and maybe some outcomes.
Sure. So the first thing I did was develop the staff, and I created the Maine Department of Corrections Leadership Academy, and we began to do book studies and
Mm-hmm.
discussions and healing circles and hearing them out. And at first, there's a lot of complaining about how they had been mistreated, mistrusted, and I acknowledged that. And at some point, we pivoted away from that. We began to professionally grow them. We
Mm-hmm.
also completely renovated the Corrections Academy to bring it up into 21st century, and so they could learn best practices in correctional in our industry. And then we began to work with the residents in normalizing the approach and creating a normalized environment where it was non-adversarial. I first arrived, it was residents are 3 paces away, get your hands out of your pockets. It was very on edge, where everybody expected a monster behind every bush. And over time, we're able to reduce that and really create an environment that's where people care about one another. People know about each other. They really understand that. And it was an educational process. We had to recognize that people are in our care because of mental health, substance use disorder, learning disabilities, poverty, neglect. That's who we have in our system. And the taxpayer expects a return on their investment. They expect someone to reenter society and not reoffend. And we set that stage and really turned the officer into a prison guard, to a navigator, to a mentor, to someone that modeled pro-social behavior that we wanted to see from the residents. And it took time, but we got there. We ended up emptying that segregation unit and created a unit called the Earned Living Unit, where the residents worked with the staff. We recreated that unit to be individualized, and we painted all the cells, personalized them. We created an environment where there are dogs being raised. We have a stove and a
Mm-hmm.
refrigerator. And if we went in there today, they'd be baking banana bread. We went into the no man's land, where between the first and second fences, where it used to be locked, and frankly, 5 years ago, the officers had the right to use deadly force if they saw someone there. Now that gate's open when the sun comes up. Residents go out there freely. They garden. They have an acre and a half of organic garden. No pesticides, no chemical fertilizers, all organically raised. And I'm a master gardener, and that garden is something out of Better Homes and Gardens. And that gives them endless salad bars. That gives them all the produce that they wish to consume. last spring when I went there, their biggest complaint was they were eating too much asparagus. So good problem to have. In fact, that
Well,
unit.
and I thought I knew my friend Randy Liberty, but now I know I'll add one to the list as master gardener.
Yeah, I love it, and so we do a lot of that work. And then I'm also a beekeeper, and so I brought in beehives, and we have 12 beehives at the Maine State Prison, and they're pollinating, and we have more than 100 beekeepers now, and we're harvesting the honey, and it pollinates all of our vegetables, and that earned living unit is virtually unsupervised. It's self-managed, self-governed. We use restorative practices to discuss and self-govern that unit. And in the 3 years it's been open, we've had zero issues, no problems. I brought another state in there, toured them through 6 months ago, and they're like, "Where are the officers?" And I'm like, "There's no officer in here. He comes through, does rounds, and says if they ask them if they need anything." And he said, "What if something pops off?" And nothing pops off because they have hope, they have dignity. Some of them are working remotely, which is something we should talk about. A couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago now, Colby College reached out to me and asked me if one of the residents at the Maine State Prison could be an adjunct professor at Colby in hybrid method. And this particular individual was one of my first arrests as the elected sheriff, and he's doing a 40-year bid. And last time I saw him, we were in a physical altercation, and I hadn't seen him for 14 years. And when I arrived at the prison, there he was, standing on the mile. And we had a conversation. And during that time, he obtained a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and he's currently working on his PhD. And he has access to the internet. And we have 600 people that have access to the internet. And he is a hospice worker. He raises therapy dogs. He's a peer instructor. He does it all, and he's done everything we've ever asked him to do. And so I considered that. And many of the listeners will recognize this, that wardens and commissioners and directors can be vulnerable to termination depending on how it goes. And so he taught a couple semesters, and then on a Saturday night, I received a call from the governor, and she said, "Tell me that he's not teaching at Colby." And I said, "Before I pack my bags, let me explain to you what he's done with the money." And that year, he earned $27,000. He paid tuition for his nephew to go to college. He donated $1,000 to Indigent Resident Fund. He bought brakes for his mother so she'd go to work, get a car inspected. He donated $1,000 to the homeless shelter. He did all of those pro-social things that we wish for him to do. And she said, "Good job." And since then, we've created 45 different remote jobs. And the most successful one, I mean, people are doing things like when they obtain their bachelor's degree, they can actually go online and search for work. And we had one that obtained a paralegal degree, and he worked for a law firm on the outside while he was inside. Since he's been released, he continued to do that work. The most successful one has been, we had a coding class, and this individual excelled in coding. And he applied for a job in San Francisco, and now he's a senior software engineer in San Francisco from the Maine Department of Corrections. He made 160 last year.
Wow.
And yes, and that requires a conversation when I speak to the conservatives in the legislature or anyone's like, "That doesn't seem fair. Where's the punishment?" And I say to them, when I was a law enforcement officer on the street, I had many burglary cases, and sometimes those burglary victims were owed $30,000 or more for what was taken. And if an individual is making $200 a month, working in the wood shop, that victim gets $20 a month in restitution. This individual is able to pay $1,000 a month and make meaningful healing to that victim in the community. He pays his child support, he pays his mortgage at home, he pays his court fees and fines, and he pays me room and board for the privilege of being incarcerated. And so everyone wins in this scenario. And then when he releases, he'll be successful. So we have a lot of people providing for their families, providing for the restitution to the victims, and really healing our communities and keeping our families strong by doing this program.
Well, Randy, it's certainly a different model, right? And you and I have been around this business for a long time. I'm starting my 42nd year in the field of professional corrections. And so let's go to the data. Give me some of the traditional outcome data. Reduction in violence. Has violence gone down in that system?
Yeah, so it sure has. And so in 2017, when I was warden and we're going through this transition, we had 87 assaults on staff. So 87 times staff were assaulted. 2 years later, we had 7 assaults on staff. 7. Significant reduction in violence, staff on staff, resident on resident. it made it not only did it help the residents, this model, but also helped the officers. The number one concern for commissioners, directors, wardens is staffing. And there are places in the nation where it's 40% vacancy rates, and we're burning our staff out, and they're working 80 hours a week, and we're destroying their families. They're ordered in, held over. It's a very difficult problem to have. There are some facilities I have in my system that are single-digit vacancy rates, and it's just been wonderful for them. It's been an environment where they can go into work and not feel like they have to go to combat every day, because people have hope, they have opportunity, they're growing, they're getting the needs met that they arrived with.
How are your communities and your legislators responding to this model? I'm going to ask some pointed questions.
They've been very, it's been very supportive, and like
they come and see it.
They do come see it. I've had many legislators come visit. The governor has come to visit the facilities, and it's an environment where my governor is a former prosecutor. She was a former district attorney, attorney general, and so she was. She and I have been on crime scenes together, so she's very aware of the damage that's done by some of these offenses, as am I. And I think that helps me with my credibility, because I'm able to say to people that are more conservative and tougher on crime, I've been to hundreds and hundreds of crime scenes. I've seen that damage done, but I also know that people can be redeemed. People can be redeemed. They can, pivot. They can, succeed, and they shouldn't be judged on their worst day of their lives. And so there's been good reception there, especially when I talk to criminal justice, public safety. My legislature is much like it is nationally, where it's very polarized, and there's something in this for everybody. If you care about the residents and their families, and you're more left leaning and programmatic, there's something there for you. And if you're more conservative, we recognize that return to custody rate for someone that attends college in the Maine Department of Corrections, the return to custody rate is 0.05%. 0.05%. I've never seen better money invested. And what I say to them, that means to me,
that's extraordinary.
Yeah, 99.5% of the time, there are no additional victims in the community. If you care about safety and security and your community overall, this is the way to make that safe. If you care about reducing tax dollars and tax burden, this is the way to do it. They don't come back to custody, they pay their taxes, and everyone wins.
Well, I had a very strong mentor of mine over the years, and he always reminded me, Robert, there is no nice way to take someone's freedom away. And the message was that, when we were balancing education and heavy use of programs and some workforce development programs in a local jail. I spent 35 years of my career in managing large local jails. That was the focus. And the data spoke for itself when you began to reduce that. And as you said, normalize an environment, but it's still prison. And you're dealing with tough people, individuals that will still make some bad choices. And I understand that how to, and in your system, how you're going to manage those individuals. But at some point, the light bulb comes on, and either through age and time and maturity, a person says, perhaps I'm ready to heal myself in here with you, and begin to follow the model. I think it's extraordinary. The numbers are there. I've read many an article about what you're doing in your local community and read some of your outcomes. I just think it's important, because most of us, when I say us, I'm talking about the general public, not you and I that have worked in this field. We get our perception of jail and prison in an entertainment version that we've watched on TV, right?
That's right.
The lock up, throw away the key version. And that's just not the reality of who we are, nor how we operate, quite frankly, any of our facilities across the country. Professionals like you doing it differently from one end of our country to the other, but very focused on this idea and this reality that 92% of all the people that you and I will ever touch inside a correctional system are returning to the streets of our communities.
That's correct.
And how we do that and how we connect them, and it's just so extraordinarily important. I'm going to ask you maybe another pointed question about the leadership risk that came with this model and with Randy Liberty's focus on how to change the culture of corrections. Was there risk?
It certainly is. If a governor appoints you and says, keep it quiet, don't ask for any money, it's very difficult to be successful. And so I've been fortunate with my governor, and but it does come with risk. When I was warden at the prison, I had a different governor, and the previous governor called me in a cabinet meeting. He called me a liberal activist, and that's job insecurity. And Brian Thornell, the director in Arizona now, was my deputy eventually, but he was the deputy in charge of me when I was warden, and he was appointed to be my handler to tone it down, and I had to go underground with some of this stuff. So it was very I was insecure there for a while, but you got to keep pushing, got to keep doing the right thing. The work that we do is really the legacy of what we've done on this earth, right? How we raise our families, how we treat our spouses, and one of the things that for me that's important is to be able to make a difference and not perpetuate the mistakes of the past. And it's a transition. It takes work. It takes caring about the people. It takes being involved and being engaged. It was important for me when I first got to the prison, when they would call an ICS and alert that there was something going on. Traditionally the warden is supposed to go to the command post and manage from there. And they learned early on, open up the doors because Liberty's coming through. And I wasn't going to have two officers standing back to back on the half court in the basketball court with 70 residents. And I was going to be there with them. And so they needed to know that I was going to get my boots dirty. I was going to be engaged. I was going to share the pain with them. I was going to care about their families. And when you do that and you're sincere about that, and they know that, they'll do anything for you.
Well, and I think the point is that, of course, not every model of the Maine model may fit, or every piece of the Maine model will fit in every system. We are not a cookie cutter. We're much different from one end of the country to the other. But I know our colleagues that sit in your chair, and to a T, each and every single one of you have extraordinary responsibilities for your staff and for the individuals in your custody. And it works differently every place. I think just podcasts like this, the opportunity to tell your story, for someone to take a bit and a piece that works, that inspired them, see where that may fit in their system. But numbers don't lie. And what you are doing with reduction in violence, what you're doing with reduction and enhanced recruiting, that's meaningful. I'm going to go, as we begin to wrap up. I've had the privilege to sit with you on a number of panels and moderate, and you've used the word hope a lot through this conversation. Started talking about that last year. As you know, through the American Correctional Association, we're focusing a lot on our faith-based work, the faith-based work that's happening inside America's prisons across this country is quite extraordinary, where the lowest rates of violence anywhere in some of the seminary programs and the faith-based programs around the country. But you talk about hope, and I think that's really what you brought to the system. I've heard you sit on a panel to talk about, without hope, it's really hard to guide anything, right?
Hope is a powerful thing. And when presented with hope and opportunity, people can thrive. But when you take that away from them, if you throw them in a cell 23 hours a day, all is lost. And that's when it goes bad, I think, in corrections, and no one wins. And so it's an important piece of what I do, is I try to provide hope and opportunity for staff and for residents, and create an environment that people can have the opportunity to thrive. And I think when you do that, you set the table for them with training, programming, leadership, it goes very, very well. And one of the things I'm proud of recently is we've started a program called Pathfinder, which allows residents to go into the wilderness, and very Norwegian-like. And so what we're doing is we've had, I think we're on our 12th trip now. In fact, I'm going on one on Wednesday when we take residents that are in a minimum security facility, they're still in custody, and we bring them to the northern Maine woods, and they spend 2 nights in a cabin with staff, and they go ice fishing, and they go snowmobiling. And it's amazing to see someone that has been in custody for 30 years hasn't gone ice fishing, hasn't been in the wilderness, has only looked through the world through a fence, and they go there, and it breaks down the barriers between staff and residents, and it becomes 6 guys out on the ice fishing, right? Talking about the journeys, talking about, they both did time. They both did a 25-year bid, right? Together. And that's been really meaningful. And we've done that.
It's just like a re-entry. It's just like a re-entry program. Are you
they're
doing
still in
this
custody? Yep.
in conjunction with release or anything? Or
it was, Chris Poulos came to, we were at a conference and we were talking, and he spends, he's made several trips to Norway, and one of the trips he did was on a Norwegian Viking ship, and traditional Viking ship, and the Norwegians bring those boats out, and they go for 5 or 6 days with residents, former residents, and staff, and they sail, they fish, they camp, and he says, "Is there anything we can do in Maine?" And sure, let's try it. So we did that, and we've hiked Mount Katahdin, we've brought on the ocean. The one we're doing again tomorrow is a 2-day, 3-day, 2 nights ice fishing, a partnership with the Department of Forestry, and they let us use their cabin, and so there's no cost really to anyone, and it has really been transformative. The resident gives something for the residents to look forward to. They come back with a different perspective of the officers, just being regular guys like they are, just trying to provide for the families, and it's been transformational. So the work we do with Chris Poulos with Pathfinders has been amazing, and we'll continue to grow that. We actually, when we were in Istanbul at the IECP, we my moderator Kim is from Norway, and Chris and I presented, and we talked about Pathfinder program. When we were done, Kim said, "Randy, you're more Norwegian than I am," and we began the journey of talking about Maine building a Viking ship, and the Norwegians coming to Maine, and us doing some work collaboratively in a partnership. So there's some good things happening, things that are exciting in many different areas, and I'm looking forward to continue this journey.
Well, Randy, I think it's just been an extraordinary conversation. I will tell you, expanding the parameters of correctional management and understanding. But as I said, the numbers and the data doesn't lie, and the outcomes don't. I think you've been an incredible example for me, my colleagues around the country, and how you've handled this change, how you've implemented some of the aspects of the Maine model. And I'm proud.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it.
I'm proud of you. I'm proud to know you. I'm proud to understand what you do and your approach. And I am looking forward to seeing what's next for the Maine model as you continue to develop it and build it and make a difference. So on behalf of the American Correctional Association, our colleagues, and our listeners, thanks for taking the time to tell your story. And we want to hear more. So perhaps this will, down the road, be part 2.
Sounds good. Love to come back.
Randall Liberty and this incredible journey. And I would tell folks, here's a gratuitous shout out for a book, your book, that is it's powerful, it's interesting, it's engaging, it's authentic, because every piece of it is the story of Randy Liberty.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.